There's some fundamental concepts. How many of you have ever been in one of my classes before at Exhibit or something like that? Okay. There's some fundamental concepts that apply to both modules we're going to talk about today, both targeting and messaging. And the first one is the idea of an action value chain. And to be successful with an event marketing approach, whether it's a trade show, a conference, whatever it may be, there's a critical relationship between the elements of messaging and getting any results. And the tie between those elements is action by the participant. So if you have an exhibit at a big industry show and you have people come and see you and they learn they can repeat what it was you wanted them to learn. They can say, yeah, I got points 1, 2, and 3. I remember the product name. I was impressed, etc. All that can be good. You can get an A+ on memorability, on clarity, on even preference. But if they don't do anything, what do you really earn from that? And so the key is, if the people who visit your exhibit act as a result of their visit, then you stand the potential to get a return on investment. If nobody does anything, then you're probably not. There will be some people that initiate their own, contact with the sales team or the distributor or whatever. Some of your sales team will be successful at following up on a lead and getting that to go. But by and large, most of the people that we see in trade show exhibits don't actually do a specific action step as a result of their visit. And so that action is the essential element in getting good or big return on investment. So we'll see how central that is to both planning and messaging as we go. So to get to any results that are monetary, you have to have a message that is clear, logical, persuasive, identifies what you want people to do as that action, and it will then result in the action that will deliver the results. So that focus on action is the central element you'll see come up time and time again. Another little trilogy, I don't know, well, actually somebody told me years ago when I was really a young guy just getting started, they said, Ed, threes are the way to present things because people can deal with 3 things at a time. Most logic is based on, the triad or the threes. And personally, as a content writer or presenter, you probably can't deal with more than 3 things at a time effectively. So you're going to see most things are in threes. Three's a magic number. But in this case, there are 3 critical success factors that you have to accomplish. If you miss one, you're not going to get any return on investment. I'd like to say if you miss any one of these steps in order, and I'm going to do them in order, you're toast. So let's see what those are. Number 1, when you have an event, you must get the right people to participate. How many of you have ever, and this is just us today, nothing's going to be shared outside, so don't be shy about raising your hand and we'll kind of indulge in a little self-pity every once in a while. How many of you have ever had an executive walk into your exhibit and look around and say, this exhibit looks great, all the colors are right on and the lasers are firing and everything looks wonderful, but there aren't any customers here? What happened? That's what I call a drive-by evaluation. So they come by, they take a look. Executives are pretty smart. They see that everything looks great, but they're not seeing enough customers to make them happy. Why? Because we didn't get enough of the right people. Or have you had the similar circumstance where an executive walks into your exhibit, says, Lynn, everything looks great, it's perfect, and it's even under budget from what I understand, and there are a lot of people here, but I don't think anybody here has the authority or the level of responsibility to actually buy our product. Have you ever had that happen? And again, either one of those circumstances speak to not accomplishing that first step, which is you have to get enough of the right people into the event or into the campaign to make the economics work. So you can figure that out, actually. You can work things backwards to figure out how many people have to be there that fit the target criteria that you set in order to make it pay off. So enough of the right people. And so am I wrong if I say if you don't get enough of the right people, that the other 2 steps are pretty much academic, right? You don't have people to give the message to who can act upon it. And the people, if they aren't the actors, are not going to be able to do the action. So this is essential as the first step. I'm kind of surprised over the years I've looked at this, how little the amount of pre-show marketing is for people who spend huge amounts of money to be at a trade show. So let's say somebody's spending $80,000 to be at a trade show, or I have a client that spends $6 million on one show. Well, you can bet the one that's $6 million has a tremendous amount of pre-show marketing associated with it. But on the $80,000 one I have in mind, they do almost no pre-show marketing. And frankly, I would say more clients than not don't do a lot of pre-show marketing. Well, it's hard to ignore that if you don't get the right people there, that you can't do anything else. And then the second element is to have the right message. If I can get the people in the room, okay, and you guys represent, by the way, an extremely well-targeted audience who saw pre-marketing campaigns try to get you to see that there was interesting content here that may be beneficial to you, and look at all the filled up chairs. It's fabulous. So now the key is, am I going to be able to tell you anything that you can use and that's going to make your life better and that you decide to go home and do as a result? So that message has to be tailored to the target audience that you've assembled, and it also has to result in some sort of proactivity. So that message is the second module today. We're going to dissect the heck out of that and talk about how that works. And then the third thing is, if you guys all leave here today and don't do anything, then we had a good fellowship time and you might have been entertained a little bit. You might have actually learned a few things, but it's not going to change anything. So the right action from the participants, the right people being compelled by a persuasive, logical message to take an action is the critical success triad. If you don't get those things done in that order, you're really not going to have a lot of reportable return on investment. Does that make sense to everybody? So this is my boiling it down for 30 years to some very simple things. Okay, so there are 3 planning questions. Now again, it's just us, let's be honest. How many of you have sat in the meeting to start planning for an upcoming show, and pretty much the first question is, what are we going to show them? What are we going to tell them? Would everybody commit to that? Okay. And that's the normal planning exercise. What are we going to show them and what are we going to tell them? How many of you have ever suffered through, how many of you kind of rent out your exhibit space based on who's contributing budget? So you have like a fourth goes to one division and another fourth to another division and all that. And so everybody wants to take everything they've got and cram it into their little percentage of the exhibit space, right? And then as customers come into the exhibit, they're only interested in the ones who are interested in their particular product lines. And so you got your exhibit that maybe has, it's sort of like going to Disney World. You got the magic, you got the, Adventureland and Fantasyland and whatever in your exhibit, and only people who go there are the ones that that part of the exhibit will talk to. So what are we going to show them and what are we going to tell them kind of leads to that approach. I'm going to suggest there's a whole different question to ask, and I'm going to give you a really tactical, little sneaky way of looking like the smartest person in the room at the next planning meeting that you go to. So when you go to the next planning meeting, let everybody start saying, what are we going to show them? What are we going to tell them? What are we going to put in the booth? We're going to put this, we're going to do that. And then wait until everybody kind of settles down. You know how you always get that pause when everybody's kind of gotten their stuff out on the table. And just say this, let me ask a question. What do we want the people who visit our exhibit at the new, upcoming ABC show, what do we want them to do as a result of the visit? And then be prepared for a lot of silence. And then just say, shouldn't we really think about what we want the people who visit us to do, and then use that as our planning scenario for what we need to show them and what we need to tell them, as completely focused on getting them to do what it is we want them to do. That will help us tailor our messages, our content, what we put in the exhibit, which products we show, everything else. If we can answer that question, what do we want them to do, then everything else will be clarified in terms of our planning and our design and our messaging and everything. Does that make sense? And they're going to think you're a freaking genius for asking that, so That's one you can tuck away in your pocket. So the 3 planning questions now, if you believe what I've said so far, are number 1, what do we want the people to do who are going to visit our exhibit? I'm going to tell you a story about that. And number 2, who are the right people that can do that, and how do we define them? And then number 3, what is it we need to tell them in order to get them to do our bidding? How do we get them to do that? Those are the real planning questions. Now, let me give you a great example. Case Equipment Corporation used to spend $2 million a year going to ConExpo, and the executives kept saying, we don't understand why we're spending $2 million. We don't really, this is a boondoggle. We don't get a lot out of this. A lot of people kicking the tires on the tractors. So the sales force whined and moaned for about 10 years to go back to the show, and finally the executive said, okay, we'll go back to the show one more time, but this time when we go back, you better be able to show us how we get payback on that $2 million. So I got called to be the person to figure out the payback and to prove to the executives that the show was or was not worthwhile. And so I went up to a big meeting in Racine. They had a huge conference table that had 60 people around it. And as soon as I walked in the door, they just threw me the football with no warning and said, okay, here's our out-of-town consultant, take it away. So they had the big model in the middle. It was a 200 by 200 yard outside with tractors and skid steers and all little models on it showing what they were going to show at the show. So I said, okay, I better come up with something really smart here. So I'm standing at the front of the table, and I said, this looks great. This is what you're going to show everybody at the show, and there are 120,000 people at this show. That's all great. What do you want them to do? What do you want the people who come to see you to do as a result of visiting you at ConExpo? And you could have heard a pin drop. And then finally, the VP of sales, the head guy for sales, said, Ed, that is exactly the right question. The answer is, if these customers who see us at ConExpo don't go to a dealer after the event, then we won't sell anything, because we don't sell, the dealers sell. We don't get any checks from end customers, the dealers do. So we have to get those people we see at the show to go to the dealer in order to sell anything. And our whole campaign changed. And a series of direct marketing elements and a number of other things were employed that got people to the exhibit at ConExpo, but most importantly, took them through the exhibit to the dealer after the event. So you see that action, as far as driving the planning, became everything.